Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast, hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host, and I have the amazing Hannah Rarick back with me. If you didn't listen to the previous episode, I very strongly encourage you to do that so you have all the context. We're going to kick this one off as the follow-up to the previous conversation. So just to rewind a little bit, I was getting ready to write my book, and this was summer of 2018, I believe. I knew I wanted to share Hannah's story in part of the book. So I wanted to get her permission for that, and I decided to look her up on Facebook. It had been a couple of years since I had peeked in on what she was up to. So I found her on Facebook, and I saw a post that literally shattered me. What I found was that she had been in some kind of accident. I didn't know the details of it because there was so much in the thread. I had to spend a little bit of time really figuring it out. But the conclusion I came to was that it was some kind of very significant road accident. And Hannah was now in a wheelchair. And wow, I had so many emotions. I had no idea what to do with that. And then even just struggling now, do I reach out to her? Is this weird? What do I say? What do I do? How do I navigate all of this? And I think I finally just sent you a Facebook Messenger basically saying everything I just said. I don't even know what to say or do, but definitely want to know what's going on. And then obviously still, we finally got around to the conversation about having me put my or your story into my book. So yeah, can you just share what happened, where what that was like when it happened, and take us on that journey from then until maybe now.
Okay, well, in summer of 2018, in June, I got on the back of a motorcycle with someone, and we had both been drinking. It was a bad idea. I lived very rurally, so, we're like, oh, it's just 5 miles to the house on a very windy mountain road. Yeah, not a very good idea. So about a mile from the establishment that we left, we ended up crashing, and I woke up. So I don't remember the crash, but I definitely woke up in the ditch, and I knew instantly that I was paralyzed. I don't know how I knew, but I did know. And then I woke up again a few days later in the ICU, and it was confirmed that I was paralyzed. First thing I did was check my hands because I'm a crafter. So, I use them for everything. And my hands worked. So I assumed I was paralyzed from the waist down because I thought you could either be from the neck down or the waist down. And it wasn't until one day I was talking with probably a nurse. The ICU days are so blurry, but I was talking to somebody and I said, well, at least I'm never going to have those arm flaps, and I'm also going to have a 6-pack. And they go, oh, you're right about your arms, but you're never going to have a 6-pack. And I'm like, wait, what? Why not? And they go, because you're paralyzed from your chest down, and you don't have control of your abs. And then that's when it kind of got a little bit more real. The early days in the hospital, I genuinely took everything day by day. I had no resentment about the accident. So I was really lucky in that way that I didn't have the anger stage. A lot of people, when they, face that, there's a lot of depression and no, this can't be me, or why me? And somehow I didn't have to do that. And I just worked on recovery, really engaged with my physical therapists and occupational therapists, and started learning as much as I could about my condition and my new needs, because it is looking like a permanent thing. I'm a T7 complete paraplegic. And so I just really dove into that, and I had to change my life completely. I could no longer do, farm work in exchange for room and board, which I had been doing for most of my 20s. I'd been living out of the back of my truck, not quite the van, but I had been traveling, living out of my truck, making art. I would, live places here and there in exchange for physical labor, and always rural. I didn't like being in town. So, once the dust settled, it became clear I needed to move to town, especially to be closer to doctors. And because the first year, especially after a spinal cord injury, there is so much, so much your body has to get used to. It's really, it's really quite a mess, and you need to have access to the professionals to help you through it. So I'd moved to town. My dad came out with me, and that was after we moved to town when I got your message, and it was so fun to hear back from you, because I just kind of went and revisited our thread, and yeah, I had been thinking about you a lot because I was back in a gym environment. In the rehab, there was the equipment we were doing, and I was like, oh man, Michelle will be so proud to hear I'm working out again, was my thought. I didn't even think like, oh, Michelle's going to be disappointed I'm paralyzed. That didn't even cross my mind. It was like, oh, cool. Like, here I am back in the gym. So it just felt so synchronistic that you reached out to me in that time.
Well, I very much believe in an energetic connection, and I think we have one because of, the early days of our friendship, our relationship. I do want to circle back, though, to your comment about I didn't have the anger that a lot of people have. I didn't have to worry about working through that. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like to go through something like this. And then I can't imagine what it's like to go through something like that and not be angry. So what do you think is different in you? What uniqueness do you have that you didn't immediately have, those thoughts? And even one of the first things you say to an ICU nurse is something like super positive, right? I mean, not only are you not angry, but you're actually positive. Explain that a little bit if you can.
Well, so I've never been religious, but I think like my own personal sense of, I don't know, spirituality or just like way of being. I'd spent a long time, like all of my 20s, just trying to come from a spot of acceptance. And, well, so how do I put this? My mother was a very anxious person, and I did not want to be riddled with anxiety in that way. So, and my dad is a Zen Buddhist, but I, like, even though when I was a teenager, I'd get mad at him because he'd be like, oh, it is what it is. I ended up sort of leaning more his direction, and it was just important to me to be able to accept what was happening. And like, I was doing my little vagabond lifestyle, and just, I wanted to anything that was happening, I wanted to know own my position in it, or, what I was adding to my own situation. There's like, when you're traveling from place to place, you're not with people long enough. I have deep friendships that lasted over years, but here I am visiting someone for a few weeks, another person for a few weeks. And so you're not around people long enough to get comfortable blaming your problems on others. So, I just kind of cultivated a way of owning my stuff and self-soothing. I always had done a mantra and practiced meditation, so that was kind of ingrained. So like in ICU, when I couldn't do anything else, I couldn't even watch the TV, just because everything hurt, and it's a full immersion experience. But my mantra would just click on, and so I think it was all that. All the practice I had put into maybe more of a Zen philosophy, I suppose, but very unofficial. I think that really paid off.
Yeah, it sounds like the way of life that you engineered for yourself actually set you up to be successful through this really horrific and traumatic experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. I mean, you didn't just one day wake up in the ICU and decide I'm going to be positive, right? I mean, this is something that you've been practicing as you grew and did this, kind of like you said, the vagabond lifestyle and owning your own position and your own choices in life. And I'm just going to say again how impressive that is for somebody in their 20s. It's impressive for any human, no matter what age, because there are people 30s, 40s, 80s who still don't own their choices, right? And so that you found that way and chose to go down that path, I think is incredibly impressive. And it's a testament, again, to why you are the way you are and why you've gone through this experience in the way that you did. So when I, reached out to you and your response back to me was so positive and it was so Hannah. I was like, well, of course she's fine. Of course she's positive. Of course she's, tackling this like she would tackle anything else with her amazing beauty and kindness and just compassion for herself and for the situation, because why wouldn't she? So it was another just little tiny moment of pride for me, but also still worried because I have friends who have had similar injuries, and I know, obviously not from my own experience, but from their experiences that they've shared with me and witnessing the challenges, what those challenges are and what lied ahead for you. So walk us through like that first year and how you did adapt literally to this whole new way of life, and what things did you have to give up? What things maybe even now do you enjoy that you never even considered a possibility or were not even on your radar before?
So the first year, I was so immersed in healing. I had some friends came forward and acted as my caregivers, and so we all worked together, kind of with the whole goal was towards independence, which can be a problem for some people if you get too coddled. Like especially, family caregivers are the most common, and then it's like, no, you rest, I'll do it. That doesn't help. I was lucky that my team I had with me was focused on independence. I had one friend who had helped me learn skills, but it was very much like pushing the baby bird out of the nest. Like, okay, try this transfer a few times. Now do it on your own. I'm like, wait, no, can't you stand here? And then definitely some of those, when you think your parents holding the bike and then you look back and realize you're on it on your own and they're not there anymore. Like had a lot of that sort of a thing happening. And then another friend was a personal trainer, so we were going to the gym and working on physical strength, which is so important. Like now suddenly I have to do everything from the chest up. And so yeah, the first year was just really focused on that. I was already engaging with the mentor community. I became friends and still am with almost everybody in the rehab facility, and also all the people with spinal cord injuries who do the mentoring. And they quickly took me into their fold and said, oh, you're going to be a mentor. So I started working with them, and I think, and it's kind of interesting, it was interesting looking back that when it was hardest physically that first year, just getting a handle on everything, that it was the easiest to just look forward and move forward. It was as things got easier and my full-time job was no longer, working on getting stronger and practicing skills 24/7. Suddenly I had a little bit more time, and I did hit down periods. And I still do every now and then. Like I think this last spring when everybody was out in their cute little dresses, I bawled for like 2 days because I missed standing up and looking cute in my little dress, So there's still those moments, but it like now that I have kind of had the sad parts too, and the mourning, it really is a mourning my old self. I mean, I was almost excited when I got sad because I'm like, great, this is relatable material, because I can't go into a newly injured person's room and be like, oh my God, you're gonna love it, because it's not a super lovable thing. It's I don't think anybody really loves it, or certainly not most people. So, then yeah, touching back to the mentoring thing, I started getting called like within the first year and a half. I'd get called when there'd be newly injured people, because I did move near the hospital. So then now I was the one who'd get to go be the first person in a wheelchair many people met, and I joined like I started hanging out more with the creators of Oregon SCI Connect, which is a organization ran by people with spinal cord injuries for people with spinal cord injuries to help educate and advocate for themselves. So right now I'm training to become a community health worker with those guys, where I'll go out and kind of bridge the gap between people with spinal cord injuries and what they need out of the healthcare industry, and then also vice versa, how the healthcare providers can relate and provide better for people with spinal cord injuries. And this is not a path I ever would have thought. In the past, I was like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm not going to town. I probably was like, oh, I don't need pharmaceuticals, but then there's a lot more to it. And, you can't, when you're faced with real big changes, yeah, like, I don't know what I was quite trying to say there.
Well, I think no, I think all that you just packaged is these are the things that you want to do it this way, but then sometimes the reality is, okay, I can fight and fight and fight and do it my way, or I can say, you know what, I'm going to accept this and accept the help, whatever that is, whether it's somebody's physical help or it's pharmaceutical help or it's, somebody thinks I would be really good in this kind of role and maybe I should go do that, right? When's the last time somebody dragged me to something I didn't want to do? Oh yeah, that was back in 2002 when my mom dragged me to the gym.
Yeah, totally.
And look how that turned out, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm happy to hear you say that you do have those down days, because that makes you normal. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right, to be relatable. I would say most people listening to this would not go through it the way you did, or the way you are. And it is totally normal to have dark days, to have sadness, to mourn the loss of the things you can't do, to be sad when you're seeing somebody do something that you used to do and that you wish you could do again. Mm-hmm. And owning those emotions is so very important. But then what you do so beautifully is you don't sit in them. You don't dwell on them. You don't allow them to own you. You move through them, and then you come back to, okay, but this is who I am now, and this is what I have now. I can be grateful for this other life that I had, but here's what I have now, and what am I going to do to make it the best it can be? And so, you talk about that after that first year, really focusing on the physical recovery. And then you get to that point where like, okay, this is kind of it. And now I have all this time. So come back to crafting and how important that's always been in your life. And how has that changed? What are you doing with that? Are you still able to do the things you like to do? Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about how you fill that time. I know the mentoring thing is a big thing, and that's going to take off in a different way. But are there still things, that creative outlet that you're allowed to express yourself?
So before my accident, I had finally gotten a glass blowing job. I was helping a friend, and this is soft glass, so furnace glass. And my friend was mostly making like glass pumpkins and cups and different things he could sell at the market, bowls, vases. And my work was in exchange for time. So I was making mostly cups, drinking cups. I did a series of bottles. Like I really liked, I was a functional crafter, mostly, but I did do a little bit of fine art dabbling. And I was so bummed that I wasn't going to be able to do glass anymore. Just because of the nature of you need 2 arms. You're constantly spinning the pipe. You're walking back and forth from the furnace. So that was a little devastating. But I've always been a sewer, and one of my good friends who had also become my caregiver when I was still up on the mountain, she was a big quilter, is a big quilter, and she came and said, "Oh, you know what is funny? My new machine is hand control." She's like, "And all the new machines lately have been hand control." And I was like, "Really?" So originally, once I was able to start sewing again, I had my old machine with my foot pedal next to me, and I would do the foot pedal with my elbow. And I got kind of used to it, so I wasn't even noticing it. And then some family members said, "We want to buy you a machine. Go get a really nice machine." So I went and, I've always been a sewer, but I've had my friends hand me down little IKEA sewing machine for years that I just made do with. And now suddenly I was in the sewing machine store and seeing all the advances in machine technology. I couldn't believe it. So I ended up picking up a really nice machine, and at first just kind of started dabbling again. I had to alter a bunch of clothes for my new specific needs. And then right away I had to figure out what kind of a bag I'm going to carry, because suddenly backpacks aren't working. A purse doesn't really work, because I would set my purse on my lap and then hit a bump and it would spill off my lap and everything would come out of it. And I looked at wheelchair bags online and they were just awful. So that was kind of right away I started designing wheelchair accessories and, figuring out what works best. And, I definitely made a few models that I thought were cool at the time, but looking back, now that I'm like 10 models deep. So I look at I actually got rid of some of the first ones. Like, no, I don't want to see those anymore. And also, like changing chairs and getting different styles of backs for my chairs, and really seeing like how many different ways, like how many different styles you actually have to have bags for all the different types of chairs, and really threw myself into that. And then my valley I live in Southern Oregon had a devastating fire and a lot of people's houses burnt down. So I started making quilts for some of my friends who lost their house for their kids. And even though I had made quilts since I was 18, I had never really made them like I started to now, because now I was slowed down, I had lots of time, I had a consistent place, I had fabric storage, I had a good machine. And I realized after I made those first 2 that I wasn't going to stop. So I really delved into quilting, and I was offered a position to put up a show at a friend's brewery. So I made a bunch of quilts. I filled the whole wall, and it was so fun because all my other art shows had been glass blowing. So now here I was having a quilt show, and I said, it'll be fun to show them, but they're so expensive because a 5 foot by 5 foot quilt can take 60 hours or more, and plus tons of materials. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to put the price tags for what they're worth, but I don't expect to sell them. And I sold all of them. I sold every single one, and then I got a bunch of commissions. And so I think the big transformation in my artistry is I became way more of a patient process artist. And, just going back really quick to ICU, the biggest lesson I got from my injury right away was patience. I had never had to wait so excruciating, what could have been excruciating if I wasn't using patience. There was all I could do was wait and get through it, and might as well get through it patiently instead of grumpily or irritatedly. And so then that kind of became how I do my quilts. I love every moment. I do hand stitching at the end, hand quilting. And some people, I taught a little quilting class where everyone just made 4 by 4 inch little coaster quilts. And people, when they got to the hand quilting phase, one of my friends looks up at one of my quilts on the wall and she goes, "I have anxiety. Now I know how long that took." And so some people, they can't do it, but every single stitch I love. So I think that's really how it transformed me as an artist. It defined the direction a little bit as far as the wheelchair and adaptive clothing goes. It gave me a specific point to focus on that I hadn't really had before. And then with the quilts, I just was slowed down. I had way more patience, and then that's also what living in a stable home environment does. Instead of traveling around and packing up projects and having to revisit them. So I would say that's what happened to my artistry.
I love that. There's so many metaphors to quilting too, and just your own process with quilting. I mean, the patience itself. Humans by nature are not patient.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can choose to be patient or you can choose to not be patient. It really is a choice. And so I love that in your own creativity, and it's in some ways, I'm sure, therapy for you, right? It's mental therapy. It's doing something that you love and you're passionate about. It's something that you get excited about and that people love it enough to pay a lot of money for it. That's got to bring you some joy as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you're sharing this beautiful craft with people, and people see the beauty in it and that they want to share back by buying it from you. I mean, there is so much in there, and I just love that you have found something that feeds you physically, mentally, and emotionally, and feeds that creative side for you, and that allows you to, to share that with other people in a variety of ways as well. So where do you see Hannah 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I'm hoping to, just really quick to go back to what you mentioned last episode about how my dream was to live in a van. I do have a conversion van getting worked on right now, and it's almost ready. So 5 years from now, I see myself as, spending a lot of time, like maybe at least half of my time traveling and mentoring and doing my community health work in rural Oregon. And like, so that's where I see myself professionally, really engaging in that. And then artistically, I hope that, I am still continuing to grow and expand. With the quilting especially, I don't see that ever becoming production work. So I just hope that in 5 years, I'll still have that value and that spark, and every one I make should be a little bit different. And yeah, I want to keep having shows. So, I guess it's I just heard my answer, and it doesn't sound like I want to be that far off of where I'm at now in 5 years, but just everything a little bit more focused.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And how would you say your relationships and the dynamics of family specifically? Because if you listen to the last episode, it wasn't all sunshine and roses for Hannah growing up. So even pre-accident and then post-accident, how have those relationships morphed?
Mm-hmm. Definitely over through my 20s, I ended up getting close with my family, my parents, and my brother, closer than I'd ever been. I definitely never wanted to move back to Colorado. I think that I liked the buffer of now we talk on the phone and online, so I do like that buffer. But we get along well. And then after the injury, I mean, it all got a lot stronger. My dad moved out to help take care of me for a year. And, my mom was out when I was in rehab. And there was a little bit of headbutting because I'd been living on my own for so long that it was weird to now suddenly have my parents around constantly. So there's a little bit of headbutting, but ultimately, our relationship is a lot stronger. We talk on the phone at least once a week, for a good hour. My parents get their phone on speaker, and me and my brother communicate regularly, usually online. And he's actually going to plan a trip out here. And as far as communicating with my friends and those around me, well, that's a tricky one because the pandemic sort of happened.
Yeah.
So there was I feel like things got stronger and closer. I really saw who comes out of the woodwork to really be there for you when something like this happens. And actually, I was really surprised to see who cannot handle it, and like who left my life since then. That was a major surprise, because I would think I'm the one going through the bad thing, but I think it scares some people. So
Yeah.
so there was definitely a split between that. Most people, really want to come out and help. So yeah, I had strong relationships before my accident, but it was always very flighty and like just a little bit at a time, because as I traveled through constantly visiting people. But now it's a little bit more strong and stable with people.
Love that. I think that's a great thing to wrap up on. I mean, Hannah, I don't know that I could have loved you and adored you anymore, but certainly after talking through this conversation, I am just so incredibly proud of you. I'm grateful to have had a tiny little piece in your journey and see all that you've become and what you've done for yourself, and the major attitude adjustment. I mean, that's probably really where it all started, right? It was your choice to make an attitude adjustment,
Mm-hmm.
and then to take things as they come and to do your own hard work. I tell people all the time, you got to do the work. And if you don't do the work, you're not going to get the results and the benefit. And certainly, as you have transitioned through lots of different things in your life, it's very obvious that you put the time and attention necessary to have that outcome, and that you're willing to learn and grow, and the adaptability and the creativity that you come up with to make your life the best it can be. And I know that people hearing this are going to be incredibly inspired by your story. And I can't wait to follow up and see how the mentoring is going, and all those other things that I know are in your future, and how you are going to so dramatically change somebody else's life because of who you are and how you navigate through these difficulties. And I feel like for me, it's probably time for maybe an updated version of my book. And I'm asking you out loud right now, putting you on the spot. Can I put this story in the updated version?
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to touch back on what you mentioned, like, it's about putting in the work. It's so easy to put it off. And I think one thing I learned recovering from my injuries, there was things I could not put off. There are things you have to do, or you're going to be lying in bed covered in bed sores. And the progress is so slow that, I go back to the patience. Patience was my biggest lesson. So, like, we all need to give ourselves grace, and you just do a little bit at a time, and like, change and progress, it can be slow. Oh, and then like my new thing that my friend really instilled in me is progress is nonlinear also. So yeah, we just all need to be patient with ourselves and just do a little bit. What I tell people when I'm mentoring them, do a little bit each day and you will see the results.
Wow, I love that. It's like you are speaking my language. I love it. And we're going to end on that. Thank you so much, my beautiful girl, for joining us today. I appreciate you. Can't wait to continue to follow you and see what's in store. And everybody for listening, thank you very much for listening, and hope you will take Hannah's words to heart, do the work a little bit every day. Change is hard, and change does take time. I have said that over and over and over. But slow progress is called progress, and if you continue to do it, you are going to see a result. And on that note, we are going to wrap up. I hope you will go and be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.